No Cerveza. That's just a disappointing state of affairs. Okay. Well, I think what we can do is get going then. I'll go ahead and bring this up. And I don't really think I had any notes, but I'll put them over here just in case. So today we're going to be bouncing back and forth between Unity quite a bit. How did I didn't look at the assignment or anything yet that I posted for you guys, but how was the other WebGL libraries? Anybody have any issues with that one? I guess everybody do it. Hopefully everybody did it. I think it's due tonight, so you still have oh, perfect. You still have about, what, 14 hours left before it's technically due. So I would definitely, try to get it done. Um, it's kind of a good look, honestly, I think, to see what else is out there. Because, again, like you've all seen, um, WebGL can be a bit finicky, and the libraries aim to really take some of that heavy lifting off of you. It should be on Moodle. Is it not on Moodle? I could have swore that I put it up there. So let me pop over here really quickly. Yeah, so that's right here. So the link is on Moodle to the video. So basically just would click that and it'd pop over to the YouTube repository. And so I'm also going to record this. No. Okay. So yeah, it's up there. Oh, we got a comment. Cool video. Thanks, bro. Yeah, so it is up. Next Thursday. It was an in-class assignment. It wasn't a lab or anything like that. All right. Thank you for already forgetting my history, Chrome. Oh, I set that wrong. Okay, well, I'm not going to punish you for my mistake. So it was meant to be this Thursday, but you have a whole week to get it done. That's fine. And I really need to... Okay, I do have push bullet off. You guys don't need to see my text messages popping up on the screen. I've got push bullet set up, but it looks like I already did it. So yeah, I guess you have a full week and a half. It should take you all of like 20 or 30 minutes to do. So with this one, you get a little bit of a grace period, I suppose. So I guess that's fine. You have a little thing to do today as well. I didn't make it a requirement to be done, but basically it's going to be a little bit of playing around with Unity. Um, I'm assuming I'm not going to go the whole time. I think I say that every class, and then I end up rambling on for longer than I need to. The nice thing here is that you can all fall asleep at home and, not worry about my feelings. But this is what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about Unity. So this is going to be, mainly the rest of the semester, unless I find something else interesting to talk about that I think you're going to need. But I know at least two of you have played with Unity. Has anybody else touched this at all? Unity is a very, very interesting framework for graphics and game development. I'll wait to see if anybody comments in chat, but basically there's a lot of places which are getting away from OpenGL and WebGL altogether and just using something like Unity. Now, the issue is that you don't get a perspective of what's happening under the hood. You can still do things like shaders in Unity. You can do lots of interesting things with it, but at its core, it's kind of a framework on top of this, a graphics library, not strictly OpenGL, but consider any of them that are out there. Now, if you're looking to relate this to something, there's also like Unreal Engine. I think is it 4 or 5 that they're up to now? But Unreal Engine would be similar. Basically, you have this cohesive framework where you would do everything inside of it. Right? There are going to be handlers for character animation, for user interaction, um, lighting, shading, modeling. Everything is just kind of baked in. The really neat thing that I find about Unity is that, outside of having this massive kind of asset store where you can just download character models or download textures and it's baked right into their package manager, you can export to WebGL or to Apple or to Windows or to Linux or to mobile. There is a little checkbox when you go to build your project and create your whatever application you're building, and you can build it for whatever target platform you want. Now you have to download the tool chain for whatever you're going to be building for. So for instance, if you're building for Android, you need all of the Android, like the toolkit for building an Android application. If you're building for a Raspberry Pi, you need the ARM compiler. So it's all baked into it. You download it through their ecosystem here, but it takes a lot of the headache out of it. And what we'll see towards the end here is that it's very, very easy to make a application in Unity and export it to WebGL. So everything that we've done so far this semester, you can do in Unity and just export to WebGL. It's about, 2 or 3 button clicks to make that happen. So I've got the link here to Unity, right there on the slides. If you've never, had to do it before, here you go. I would highly recommend giving it a shot because again, we're going to be doing this for most of the rest of the semester. But basically you have some really interesting things that you can do on their website. So obviously you want to download it, right? Download it for your target platform. But they also have lots of learning tools on here, which is great if you want to learn this framework. I'm going to give you some of the basics, but if you want to go a little bit deeper, I think I might be in the wrong spot here. It's like, where did the top bar go? There it is, learning. I think I'm in the wrong spot, perhaps. Unity tutorials. Unity, oh, it's learn.unity, my bad. Thank you, thank you. So basically, if you want to learn a topic to import into whatever project that you're going to be building, it's all on here. So I've been, as I've learned Unity, I've made a lot of use of these tutorials. And I should say I am not an expert in Unity by any means. I'm more of an enthusiast. I think it's really cool. Personally, not an expert in it though, so I'm going to do my best to at least present to what I know for you. And if you guys want to take that much, much deeper, I'd highly recommend checking some things out. So, rather than kind of ramble around their websites, we'll talk about the interface and all of that here as well. One of the things that I'm probably going to have you all do is their Rollerball demo application. So I'll show you an example of that towards the end. But basically, it's like a 4-part video tutorial series. And it takes you through a 3D animation of controlling a sphere, applying collision detection and physics, and various other physical properties, and collecting objects inside of a space. So that's kind of the simplest game application that they have up there. But it's in a, like I said, it's a four-part video series where it's very well presented. And then, if that works out, you like that, they have a ton of other tutorials out there too. Like there is a 2D roguelike tutorial, which I'm going to assume, the two of you doing the Unity project have probably looked at. But, there's a lot of different things out there, which is great, I think. So Unity by itself, and again, if you already know all this, feel free to tune me out and work on your term project. Obviously, I can't sit here and glare at you all for watching YouTube while I talk. Or sorry, Twitch now. Um, but this is mainly if you've never used Unity or you don't really know what it is or you want to learn more. So it is a cross-platform framework. Now, graphics, game development, anything graphical, anything that you want user interaction with, it can be used for. It's not strictly a game engine. A lot of people use it for that, right? But you can do a lot with it, which is great. Now, if you're looking to also liken it to something a little bit more business oriented, it's a development environment. So it's an IDE. It has the graphics engine and then the development side of things. Now, if you're in the Windows world, it's going to pop open Visual Studio. You'll be coding in C Sharp. If you were in a Linux-based system, it's going to probably pop open MonoDevelop or whatever development environment you have, and you're going to be writing in Mono, which is basically just open source C Sharp. So that's kind of why this environment is nice. You can install it on whatever system you have. You don't have to have a Windows only machine or a Mac only machine or something like that. So cross-platform, which is great for game developers or any developer, right? So with this, and I've kind of mentioned this already, you can develop applications for whatever target system you're shooting for. So phones, consoles, tablets, websites. Um, Depending on your watch, you could probably make a watch application with it. But, develop for whatever you want. And it's a neat thing. So if you want to liken it to what we've seen so far in the class, it's kind of, at least to me, it's like a mix of Blender and WebGL. So obviously we have the graphics engine, you have this nice framework, we're going to have a scripting side of things. You can actually do some modeling in Blender as well, apply texture. So everything that we've done so far, it's just mushed together into one environment. And there is a lot that we can do with this, which is kind of nice. Now, one of the things which you might be concerned about as you go to download it, if you haven't already, is that there are some different categories of this product. So based on what you're doing and who is using your application, you may have to pay for it. But if you are going for the personal edition, that's free. So you don't pay for anything. That's what you should all be downloading. You're not selling your game. You're not running a business right now. Well, I guess you can still sell your game. But if you kind of look here at this this bar here, go away. So if you are making less than $100,000 on this, or you're, basically have a small business or something like that. I'm not an expert on the legality of this kind of thing, but I will say as a student, you're fine to use the personal edition. You start making tons and tons of money because the game that you developed in class is selling like gangbusters. Might have to upgrade your subscription model, but by and large, a lot of people use the free edition. And if you go to any website where you see, made with Unity or built by Unity, more than likely that's the free edition, the personal edition. You get stuck with that loading screen, which is just there. So, keep that in mind. If you guys all go pro, feel free to start giving the Unity Foundation some money for their product. But just go with the free edition. Don't install the paid editions. Okay, so if you like this framework, and again, I'm going to recommend that you all install it. Otherwise, some of these demos are hard to follow along with. I've got a direct link to the tutorials that I was looking for earlier. I swear they changed this up a little bit because before it didn't look like this. Interesting. So when I was looking at this the other day, literally a couple days ago, there was Rollerball 2D roguelike. Just search for it. Is it not even in here now? I swear I'm not losing my mind. All right, it's in there somewhere. Yeah, right here. I have to Google it to find it. But basically, this is what you would end up coming up with, and they've got a four-part tutorial series, which I will have you all look into. But yeah, so there's the link there. They changed some things around while I wasn't paying attention. All right, so this is your first look at Unity. You get the Unity Hub, as far as I'm aware, at least. I get it whenever I install Unity. I assume this is going to be the same for all of you. But what you see here is kind of your interface. Now, what you will find is that you can manage your different versions of Unity. So you can actually have multiple builds of the Unity engine on your system. You can have different platforms. So here I've got some projects that either I or some students have been working on. So I was kind of thinking around with a Zelda-like game. This middle one was an undergrad student was doing an independent study with me. Some researchers were trying to do some Roomba simulations, researchers being, I guess, my grad students. But this is the live version that I've got here. So yes, and I'm using the current version. But if I say look at this test version, so you can actually pick which version of Unity you're building a project for. So I've got a few demos here, which I've just more or less backed up for just in case my live demos go poorly. But you can pick which Unity version it's built for. So I have only been maintaining one Unity version on my system because it takes up some space and I'm trying to kind of minimize space usage, but you would see all the different versions of Unity that you've downloaded. And you could swap that in here too. So that's the hub. That's going to pop up and it's going to run all the time. So if you go to your, we don't want to right click, single click. So you've got this little Unity icon in the bottom here. Can we see this or no? Yeah, we can see it. All right. It's this little Unity guy. And that just pops up the hub. So with Unity, and again, feel free to interrupt me, raise your hand if you have any questions. Oh, I'm not in the Discord channel. Sorry, let me do that right quickly. Not sure if anybody's in there, but I at least want to make sure I can hear you all. Oh, and I didn't change my bot. I went to bot testing. Got a little bot testing channel so that you all don't get spammed when I'm dinking around with my setup here. All right, so if anybody has any questions, you want to use voice, I'm in that channel now too. All right, so with Unity, you have your choice of visualizations too. You can go full 3D, which I'm sure you've all seen if you've done any kind of a Unity application or played any kind of a Unity game on the web. Full 3D, you can do a pure 2D application. This one on the left here that I'm kind of circling around, this is the roguelike 2D tutorial that I was kind of mentioning. So this is something you can run through on the Unity website. It's a little bit more in-depth than Rollerball, but if you want to do 2D, it's kind of a nice introduction to that. They talk about sprites and animations and procedural generation and all that fun stuff. So here you see 3D, we have 2D, and then at the bottom here we have 2.5D. So this is kind of an interesting one. Does anybody know what 2.5D is? I think we talked about it a little bit in class when we talked about perspectives and camera views and all that. Isometric. So it's not quite isometric. That's a good guess. Isometric is where you have those three angles coming down, right? So, oh, I've got a good visualizer here. So, see how this looks. Not gonna get it right. So there's your isometric view, right? Kinda. Can't do things mirrored in 3D space. Yeah, so it is still technically 3D. It is locked to a plane. That's a great way to describe it. So the character models are in 3D, the backgrounds are in 3D, but the camera is kind of giving you this slightly locked view, which is following it along, right? So I am lecturing right now. Are you in my class or are you somebody else? Regardless, welcome. I have no idea what any of my students' names are, so but yeah. Real names, I know what they are. Internet names, I have no idea. Sorry. Am I lecturing right now? Yes, I'm lecturing right now. I assume everybody can see everything okay. But, yeah, so 2D game point. So 2.5D. Yeah, we're basically locked to a plane. So, now if you want to do 2.5D in Unity, what you have to do is you still have to use a 3D view. So when you launch a Unity project, so for instance, if I pop in here and I want to create a new one, pick the Unity version, that's fine. Again, in that drop down, it'll list out all the builds that I have. You can pick 2D, 3D, 3D with some extra steps, a few other things, but basically if you wanted 2.5D, you would still need the 3D view because you're using the three-dimensional camera. So we'll leave this here for now and go back to the slides. You can even do this in Unity too. So if you wanted to do parallax, so again, that's where you like have different planes of view where, say, the background moves a lot slower than the foreground. This is still feasible. Basically, what you're going to have is a perspective view. So this would still be a 3D environment, but you kind of see all these different planes which have been added in, and the camera would scroll around, say, in the X direction here. So you get a nifty little parallax effect. So you get something that kind of looks like this. So kind of gives a nice little bit of naturalness and feel to your, your 2.5D or your 2D 2.5D project. All right, so questions so far? Everybody good? As basic intro to what the framework is. Nifty, yep. Hey, you're not in this class. All right, so with Unity, we're just going to create a new project. There are some things which are going to be very helpful for us. So we're going to have game objects, which are going to be basically your primitives. We will have prefabs, which are very, very cool. They are going to be basically entities that we will interact with. Physics objects, collision detection objects, scene scripting, character scripting, everything scripting. Yeah, this is what we're all going to be playing with. And make sure that you save everything as you go, just to make sure that everything is good. Again, scripting is going to be in C# or C# like. And if you do not know C#, don't worry, it's very, very easy. I'm sure at this point you've all taken Java. It's basically Microsoft's version of Java. So very, very easy to use. We're probably not going to dip into it too much, though. Excuse me. Ooh, you got wings. I like that. I swear I don't have the Rona. My throat just gets dry from talking so much. All right, so we'll call this 4900 in class 1. So new Unity project. So we get this lovely little screen loading up, and it's going to instantiate an environment for us that is in 3D. be really great if my mouse started working again. Well, we're going to do 3D development with the touchpad today. So my mouse is dead. All right, so while that's going to take a hot minute. One of the things that we should talk about while that's loading up are assets. So this is one of the big, I guess, big helpers in Unity. So it's very asset driven. Now, assets for Unity can be basically anything. These can be character models, plus animations, plus bone models. It can be various events that happen. It can be scripts, can be textures. Basically, it is anything, basically anything that you can think of that you would import into a graphics application. Even various cameras and camera effects or particle engines here. These are all things which are available on their asset store or in other places. You can download them and import them as well. He's still loading? Dang, taking a while here. So we'll look at the store in a moment. So as soon as this gets up and running, I thought it was going to be done by now. I guess not. I guess while that's loading, we can chat about the environment too. So if you look at my little screenshot here, this is what you see when you load up Unity. The ball's not there. You just have a blank scene, kind of this default skybox looking area. On the left here, this is your hierarchy of your scenes. So basically any of your objects will be listed on the left here. And again, all of these panels are rearrangeable. So if you like a different view, feel free to use a different one. I'm just going to use the default one for now. But yeah, this is what you would see when you kick off Unity. And I think everything's good and loaded. So yeah, this is basically it. The camera controls are a little bit different than Blender. So like I am right clicking. Yeah, this is going to be super painful if I don't get my mouse up and running. You know what? I will be right back. Let's give this a shot because I'm gonna go grab a wired mouse. Okay, we're back. Yes. Wired mouse. Okay. So let's give this a shot. I bought this mouse when I was an undergrad off of eBay. And I bought it because I got so mad at my prior mouse that it got thrown against the wall and it shattered. All right. That over here. You can go away. And we have a mouse. Woohoo! Okay. Life is good. So left clicking will select things. Right clicking will kind of pan the camera eye around. Well, not pan, but point the camera eye. Mouse will zoom in and out. Mouse click will do a pan. And you have a little gizmo up here as well where you can pick your different views. And yeah, so let's go back to a more default view. All right, so here's my scene. And I want to look something like that. So you can see I've got a camera object. You get a nice little preview of what the camera can see. Oh, is that why you're here? Well, so I'm getting some of my 3670 students in class too. You guys are all more than welcome to hang out and listening to. So if you are new in here, we're going to be talking about Unity for the rest of the semester. But, feel free. It doesn't bother me at all. You're all under home quarantine anyway, so might as well do something useful, right? But yeah, so anyway, you have your camera here. So this is the same idea as with WebGL and Blender even. It's going to have a lens. It's going to have a near and a far plane, depending on what your camera is set up as. You get a default camera. You have a default light as well. The light, you can kind of see what it's pointing at. So this is a directional light. You are getting, a light source which is pointing towards something. We could add other lights. You could add your point light or your spotlight, whatever you want to light up your scene. So yeah, basically this is your hierarchy. This is obviously your main view. We'll talk about this a little bit more in a moment here. On the right is your inspector. This is where you'll probably be spending a lot of time, honestly, because these are all the attributes that you can play with for your objects. So for instance, here I've got my light selected. I can change its position. And this is an interesting thing. I don't know of many other frameworks that do this, but if you want to, you can change the parameters. These are in text boxes, but you can actually just grab the label, left click, and kind of drag it around there. Or you can play with the rotation, for instance. You can kind of see the direction changing. I can make it a spotlight. I can make it a point light, so it's going to just be like a sun. Can make it bigger or smaller, for instance. So let's leave this as 10, change its color. So there's a lot of things that you can do in here, right? And with that, so let's say that we're not going to look at the light. Let's add a 3D sphere. So apparently the light has killed my, I'm going to create a new project. No, I'm not. Just going to fix my light rather than do this. So I broke my light, so it's going to look terrible. So let's get our directional light back. There we go. All right, so this is our sphere. We're in our scene view. If I pick the sphere, again, I could pick it in the hierarchy or just left click it. I get all of the sphere related objects properties, and we'll talk about those fairly soon too. On the bottom here, you have another panel, so you can have all of your assets, your packages, your scenes. These are all things which are on your machine. So for instance, this scene or these packages, these are all in my project folder. I can also create prefabs out of these and basically instance out this sphere if I wanted, with animation, with materials, with lots of things. A console, this is going to be error output that you're mainly going to see, or debug output from your scripts. If you start playing around with importing assets, you might start seeing random compiler errors pop up. Just make sure the asset that you have imported or the script that you've written is fine for the current version. Animation, this is, I don't believe it's in there by default. I added it in because we're going to look at animation a little bit later on. So yeah, this is basically your interface. And you can change the layout to whatever your preference is. I'm just going to leave it as the default, like I said. All right, so that is Unity. And what I did was I created a game object, so a 3D object. So again, this is our primitive here. We have a sphere. It already has shading and a default material applied to it. I could add other 3D objects. So I could add terrain, which we'll talk about very soon too. But I could add a capsule, a cylinder, add 3D text. I could add trees. In the 2D space, you could add sprites, tile maps, particle systems. So these are all things that are just baked right into Unity, right? Like these are effectively built-in assets, which makes your life a lot easier, more or less. To me, Unity is more of a insert what you need and configure it and script it rather than focus too heavy on the graphics. But obviously it has to look good too. So that might be a bad statement to make. All right, so we have a ball. So far, so good. Yeah, other thing I should mention too in here is that Y is up and down. So if you look here at your little gizmo, Y is green. It goes up and down. X is going to be your horizontal, and then Z is coming in and out of your monitor, basically. So this is more so what you would think of as a, typical 3D view. It depends on the frame that you've defined, right? So another thing in here too, if you want to orient the camera to your frame, you can just click your object and hit F, and now we're oriented to this object. I could do the same thing with the light. I could hit F. I should be able to hit F. Maybe I have to double click it. Yeah. Some things are a little wonky. So now the light is in my frame. Basically the camera, so I'm also double clicking these objects in the hierarchy here. I'm orienting my view to whatever object I want. So with my current frame, my frame of reference is this object. All right. One other thing too, so you have a couple of different views of your scene. So basically, I should mention, I didn't really say what a scene is. A scene is what your current area is. So Unity is very scene oriented. You can have multiple scenes. So like, for instance, here I just have this ball in this infinite space. This could be level 1, right? Or this could be a house on my neighborhood, and then another scene would be modeling Oakland University or something like that. So scenes are just what you're trying to capture in this current state. However you want to visualize that, whether it's like a book chapter or a level in a game or a particular scene in a movie. That's basically what a scene is. And you can go from scene to scene to scene. A scene might be your pause menu, for instance, too. And I've made some changes, so I'm going to save it. So you saw the little asterisk on sample scene, gets saved. And then what I can do here is actually see my sample scene here in my projects as well. So if I had multiple scenes, I could double click it and go to that scene, for instance. So here I've got scene 1. I could add a new scene. We'll call this, right now it's untitled. I need to save it. This is going to be scene 2. And now I've got that scene. And it's not in the correct location, so I'm going to put it in scenes. OU is only level 2. Your home is level 3 because, I don't know, why not? So anyway, here you can see these two scenes. So right now I'm in scene 2. I can go back to scene 1 just by double clicking, and there I go. I would have some kind of a controlling script which would move me from scene to scene to scene, for instance. Yeah, OU is only level 2. If you go for your master's, that's level 3. Grad PhD is level 4. And then streaming your lectures from home is level 5. So there. But these two views, since I forgot to talk about what a scene is, the scene view, which we have here, it's going to be these little tabs at the top. And I added asset store because we're going to look at that later. Basically, if you go to your package manager, you can look at the asset store. I just made it a tab here because I'm going to be using it later. But the scene view, you have a more typical kind of a 3D modeling framework where, I can play with my properties. I'm kind of transforming this sphere into a little bouncy puddle type of thing. So undo that. But the game view, is the Mafia meme. That's how Mafia works. Level 2 boss. So this is going to be the game view. This is what your camera sees when you would click the play button. So the play button here at the top is basically launching your game or your application. All right. So if you're in game view, you can interact with the scene like it's your game, but this is basically what it's going to look like starting out. So in scene, you're going to be playing with all your objects and setting everything that you need. I can go anywhere in the space, do what I need to do, get everything set up. Then I could go to my game view. This is what I see in here, right? And you can wander around in this area as well if you want. But for instance, here, like I would click play. It's going to take a second to go. Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure how Unity and the streaming software are going to play or going to work together, since Unity's kind of little bit heavy on the RAM usage for me. But anyway, so I hit play, and then I have my scene here, which I could interact with. So all I've done is define a ball. Nothing's going to happen, but I could actually play my game in this preview editor. And you can do all your testing, try things out, and do that in here. You can also zoom. You don't get a great view. It looks very pixelated when you zoom in. If you wanted the ball to be a lot closer, I'd move my camera closer. So for instance, let's pop over to our camera, kind of zoom it in. Oops, I want to position it. I don't want to rotate it. So let's move it a little bit closer. Let's rotate it a little bit. Now when I rotate in my X direction, so I'm rotating about X. I want my zoom or my scale to be 1. And move it a little bit closer, rotate about X a little bit more. You can even see here the preview, it's what you're going to be seeing. Hopefully it's a little bit closer now. A little bit, not by much. If my ball was moving around, I could actually make the camera a child of this object, and the camera would then follow that. So that's the other thing too with this hierarchy, is that objects that are children of other objects will automatically be a part of that. So for instance, if my sphere had controls attached to it and I start rolling it around, since I have dragged the camera to be a child of it, the camera will actually follow it around. It's not going to be great. You're going to have to massage it a little bit to make sure that the movement is what you want, but it's kind of a nifty way to get like a over-the-shoulder type of camera. Okie dokie. So everybody good so far? I'm noticing a lot of skipped frames on my stream, so hopefully everything's coming through okay. Doing my best to look at the camera too, since it's no longer right in front of me. It's off to the side a little bit. But anyway, so here we are in our scene view. I've got my sphere. It's been kind of made into this ovally capsule-like shape. So all that's really happened here is, let's make our sphere our frame of reference. Awesome. I guess that was the other thing too. If you guys are noticing any kind of degradation in quality, this is an HD camera. I have no idea how it's going to play with my home network since, well, I'm not on school speeds anymore. I'm now at home. But yeah, let me know if there's any problems. So if I wanted to transform this object, I can basically play around with its scale. I can rotate it however I want. Actually, this is kind of an interesting thing too. So I'm left clicking and holding this label, and I'm scooting my mouse around, and I'm just kind of, it's like wrapping around. It's really interesting how this is handled. It's not going over to my secondary monitor. It's just bouncing around my screen. So just kind of a neat little thing that the developers have put in here. So now I've got this interesting shape, kind of a flat disk. Nothing exciting, but I've morphed to shape, right? And again, this has some shininess to it, so it has its default texture. Right. So right now it is just an object. It has nothing other than a geometry and a material. And those are default or whatever I've modified them to be. We can turn this into a component. So a game object and a component are different. Now, this is where things start to get interesting, at least I think, because if I want to make this an object with mass, I would make it a rigid body. If I want it to be an object that will collide with other objects, I would add a collider to it. And the collider is going to be, kind of like a bounding box around it. Whatever the shape that I have, I would have an appropriate bounding box or bounding object, like a capsule or a sphere or a triangle or whatever we want to define. So a rigid body, you will see this when you start looking into physics simulators. So a rigid body is not deformable and it has physical properties. So what this means is, again, it's going to have mass. Mass is impacted by gravity. Mass will have inertia. So if an object starts scooting off, it's going to have some slowdown time as it kind of breaks, for instance. So it has mass, if you want to consider that. It's cultivated mass. Non-rigid objects, so if I don't make it a rigid body, I make it something that is not rigid. Basically, the geometry and topology can change, so you might define a non-rigid building where it can break apart, or something that's bendy, for instance. And then we also have intangible objects too. So these are going to be objects which don't really have a shape. So kind of like a particle system, some kind of a gas or a smoke or fire or something like that. So rigid body is going to be very useful for you to make objects more real, basically. So this screenshot that I've got here, there's a collider and a rigid body that's been applied to an object. So the collider means, again, that it will use this ethereal wireframe collision area to interact with other objects that also have colliders. So for instance, I'm going to get myself into trouble with my hand movements, I think. If I have two spheres, and these are spheric colliders, they're going to bounce into each other. Whereas if there is no collider, it's just going to pass through, right? And you can set various properties. You can actually tweak these collision boundaries to be, more precise or less precise. Obviously, if it's more precise, it's going to take up more processing power because you have more formulas to calculate based on kind of a non-standard object. Like box-box collision is much, much easier than something which is randomly drawn, and I have very pixel-perfect collision detection. So that's what a collider does. We'll look at that in a little bit. You can actually, I will say this too, you can trigger events to happen on collision. So for instance, if I collide with another object, I can trigger a callback function, which I'm sure you all remember when we talked about callbacks, except for those of you who are popping in from the other class. But basically, there's going to be some script that fires once a collision happens. Then you can increase your score, decrease your health bar, do a game over event, whatever you want to do. So callbacks are usually very, very helpful, and they're probably going to be used quite often. So the rigid body component then, like I said, it's got mass. We can have drag. We can play around with the gravity. So there's a lot of various properties that you can use as you make something a rigid body. So let's pop over here. So I've got my disk selected. And what I can do is if I go over here to the component and then physics, you will see all of these various options to make it a component instead of a straight up object. So I can add all these various colliders here. I can make it a rigid body. I can have it act as cloth. And if I had cloth, I would have some kind of a wind or some other deformation properties. But let's make it a rigid body. You see it pop over here in the inspector view. So this is where I said that you're going to be using the inspector a lot because all of your properties are in here. And the other really interesting thing about the inspector view, we're not going to talk about it today. We will when we go more into scripting. But if you define, let's say that you create a character, or you're making a game, you create a character. A character is going to have properties like this person's health. Maybe it's sprite that's being used. So I'm defining all of this in my code. Right, let's say that I'm not using this view. I'm in the, I'm writing in C#, I've created a class. Those properties can actually pop up here in the inspector. So for instance, if I define, and you have to define these in a special way, otherwise it won't pop up. You basically have to make them public and a couple other things. But let's say that I make this player's health start at 100, and I'm going to make an enemy character as well. And I just copy my main character and I make this one the enemy, I can set the health right in the inspector, or I can make them faster or something like that. So this is where Unity is actually really cool. I don't have to go into the code and edit a bunch of consts, for instance. I can just create objects and play around in here in the inspector, but we'll get to that later on. So right now this is a rigid body. It has mass, it has drag. I'm going to leave all the settings as default. And now I can hit play, and goodbye. It has gravity. Who knew? So again, when you hit play, it's actually going to run. I noticed that this just ran really slow. If you ran this yourself, it would be a lot smoother. This is just because I'm also streaming on the same machine. And my laptop is not the best for handling all this. But it has gravity. It just fell through the world. Right now, there is no terrain. There is no plane of existence. This thing is just kind of floating in space, right? So that's what gravity will get you. So what I did was I went through the toolbar up here. So I went components, blah, blah, blah. You know, you have lots of other things you can do in here as well. You can also do it from the inspector view. So you just click add component and you can search for whatever you want, which to me is a little bit easier than navigating through menus and submenus. Like if I wanted to add, make this cloth, I just type cloth and it pops up right here. And it would automatically be applied once I clicked it, rather than navigating the paint. Do whatever you want, whatever you're comfortable with. But being able to quickly search is kind of nice, to me at least. So with Unity, you have lots of options. All right, questions so far at all? We all good? The thing with Unity is that the reason why I don't have a lot of expertise with it is I will do a sample project and I'll get it kind of minimally working, and then my attention will get pulled elsewhere and I'll forget to continue the project, and then I forget how Unity works. And they update their version, and then I get even more lost. But I love the idea of Unity, and a lot of people are out there using it right now. So we've talked about rigid bodies. We talked about all the basics. So let's look at animation a little bit here. So animating things in Unity is very, very easy. We did not get into animation in Blender, but the concept is very similar. You will have a timeline. You will set keyframes for the state that you want the object to be in at a particular time. And then Unity will try to interpolate how this motion is going to happen. And you will have lots of flexibility with what you want to do. Like if I have my disk and I want to move it from point A to point B, and maybe as it goes, I want it to deform along the way, you can definitely do that in the animator. But we're just going to move something from point to point. So to animate, we need the animation window and we need to create an animation component. So let's do this with our object here. Like I said, I've got animation already here, but you would need window and then animation and then animation. And that will pop up this little tab here. All I did was I dragged and dropped it to the bottom. You can put it wherever you want, like I said, but I'm going to have it down here and make it a little bit bigger. Now, if I want to put an animation on the sphere, I need an animation clip. So I just click create. I will save it as something a little reasonable here. So sphere.anim. And then I get this timeline view here. Now, I will say one thing too. A really good idea is to keep your files all organized well. Like right now, everything that I have is in scenes in this folder. If I actually right click it, I think I can, yeah, show and explorer. So I have this Unity demos folder. Here's my project. In assets, there's a scenes folder. Here's all my objects plus all their metadata. Usually what's a better idea is to have like an animations folder, a prefabs folder, a scenes folder like you see here. I'm being super lazy and just dumping everything into one folder. But for instance, if you're working on a team, it's very easy. If I need to update the character animation, I would go to the animations folder, characters, so on and so forth. Because this, I've got a simple sphere here with two scenes. And I'm getting objects for every single entity. Consider making an application more feature rich. This is going to be a very, very big list. So it's good to kind of separate out your scenes or your folders. So what I'd actually do, let's create a folder. Let's call it animations. And let's actually move. Is this the animation? So yeah, there's controllers in animation. So let's move the animation into here. So I can just keep track that way. Make your own folder structure as you want. If you start following any tutorials on the web, there's going to be, everybody's going to follow a fairly standard way of handling this. So you'll kind of get it as you go along. So right now I've got the sphere animation. I can pop back over to my tab, or I could double click it, and it would take me to the animator. So what we want is, let me get this back up so I can see what I'm talking about. What we want to do is we want to create an animation clip, and then we want to record keyframes. So I'm going to transform this from position 1 to position 2. Again, feel free to animate this however you want. Make it spin around as it moves. Again, it's your environment to play in. So we've created an animation clip, and this is just going to run once by itself. We could call this animation to happen on some event. So like a character bumps into the wall, I might play an animation where it kind of bounces backwards a little bit. So here I've got my cube or my sphere selected. I'm going to click this little record button to record keyframes. I'm going to add a transform property, and I want to change its position. So I'm going to click the little plus here. So my position is now an animated property. So you can see this keyframe has appeared here. That's this little diamond. And then let's go to another one at 15 seconds. I'm going to double click, and a new keyframe pops up. So as I drag my timeline, obviously nothing's happening, right? But if I go to this keyframe here, I zoom out, let's move it. Is this going to deform it? That looks like a deform, yeah. This is where I should have probably talked about this little bar here at the top. So this little menu that my mouse is hovering over is what property I'm currently modifying. So right now scale is selected. I'm going to pick the move button, and I want it to move over this way. So let's move it off screen. Zoom out a little bit. So now what we see is that as I kind of scrub through my times here, I see this moving. So keyframes, just to summarize, keyframes are the state of your object at a particular point in time. And the property is what you are animating. All right. So then, this is just a standard move. So there's nothing, I'm not like easing into my final position. I'm not zipping, there's no fluidity here. What we can do is, where's my curves button? Curves. So this is the dope sheet. So I'm showing keyframes. If I click curves, now I see this little graph here of my actual movement. So the Y position is basically how far it's moving. And then I can play with this little curve here, and I can ease it in, or I can make it zip a little bit faster. So for instance, now if I played this, it would kind of ramp up slowly and then go to it. So does that make sense? Keyframes are the states. The curves is going to be kind of the feeling of what your animation is doing. And again, super simple animation. I'm just moving position. I could also add in rotation. Let's do that too. Let's add in rotation. So I want here, it's fine. And then at the end state, I want it to rotate about the X, for instance. So we could have that. Let's flip it about Z too. All right, so as I kind of scrub through again, we see it's rotating and moving. All right. And again, these curves, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. You actually see a pattern. So I only have it, looks like it's actually going to run for a minute, which is probably way too long for this. But it's going to repeat itself if I set it to repeat. So it's going to go back to its first state and keep going. All right, so I'm done recording. If you're not recording, you can right click and add a keyframe. If you're recording, you can just double click. So if I wanted to add keyframes, so I could have intermediate states too. I don't have to just have start and end. I can have start and then however many states I want to be in as you go. All right, so basic animation, kind of nifty, I think. Now, it's usually a good idea to name this thing because we want to apply it. So let me go back here. Right now, this is just called animation. Oh, I named it sphere, so life is good. All right, so I'm going to save it. Make sure you save. And away we go. So let's play this and see what happens. You just kind of see it going, rotating, zipping back to its home base. Now, this sphere, why are you not falling through the world? Animator, sphere. So what I was expecting to happen was this to fall through and die. I'm guessing I forgot a property somewhere. Interesting. So what I should be seeing, and I forgot to click something, and I'm not sure what it was that I missed out on. Okay. So what we should be seeing is this object should be falling through space. All right, so again, it's got nothing to collide with. It should still be a rigid body, so I'm not sure why that's happening. I must have done something while I was dinking around with it. But basically, the point is that if you animate an object, keep in mind that if you define it to be a rigid body, it should still interact with the physics here. Again, I probably screwed something up, and rather than figure out what happened, I'm going to take a quick look here. Rigid body's active, right? Let's make its mass a little bit bigger. No, it's still going. Interesting. Any Unity experts know what I screwed up here? I find it interesting that the scene is just looping too. Normally it just kind of goes on forever, so I must have something selected wrong here. If I do this, I want it paused. Yeah, so here it falls. The animator must not be respecting my animate physics. And it really interesting. So what I would expect to happen in this case is that the animation runs once, and as it's running, it falls down. But here it's kind of going back and forth, so I must have mixed up the animation somehow. Loop. Maybe I don't want it to loop, that might be it. Yeah, something's going on. If I figure it out, I'll let you guys know outside of class. But should have fallen through the atmosphere. And the point is that if you have that, take off the rigid body or make sure that it's interacting with your environment correctly. Okay. So, actually, you know what? Let's, I'm not going to open up another Unity project because that will just kill my machine. We can also add lights as well. So I already showed you this a little bit, so I'm going to kind of skip through it. But like right now, this light is directional. So if I double click it, this is what we're seeing. I can make this point light, where now my object isn't really illuminated all that well. So we just kind of have a black disk because the light's not hitting it perfectly. If I make this a little bit bigger, I'm going to get a better view. Or no. Oh, intensity is 1. Let's make it brighter. That helps. So the same properties to lights apply, to anything here. I could also animate the sun if I wanted to have it like move around my object. You can animate your camera, whatever you want to do here. Actually, let's try something out because I think this will be an interesting example. Let's make the camera follow the sphere and see what happens. Since I told you this would work. A little bit nauseating, so I haven't done any, modifications of what the camera's field of view is, how far off the object it is. But all I did was I dragged the camera and made it a child of the sphere, and all of a sudden it magically is following it from its default location. So keep in mind that if I'm going to make a camera a child of some object, that camera's fair frame of reference is now in relation to that object, not your worldview. So make sure that if you are setting coordinates manually, that you understand, where your frame of reference is coming from. So let's save this and move on. Another thing we can look at too are materials. So this is a massive rabbit hole. I will say this, it's a lot of fun to play with materials. Basically, all you do is apply a material component to your object. So for instance, here, I could add a component. Say I want to add a material. Oh, I'm on my camera. Cameras you can't apply material to. Wouldn't make sense. But let's see here. Right now I've got a default material applied. So this is just the standard view. I could add a material, texture. What's going on here? Game object. Mesh. I did this last night. You think I'd remember where the option is? Components. Rendering? Seriously. Where are my materials at? Well, this is a good example of importing something from the store. So if you go to Window and then Asset Store, you get this window pop up, or you can do it from the internet. Basically, your Unity account, which you're going to have to set up to make this work, will allow you to basically log into the store and pull down whatever assets you want. So for instance, if you look in here, and I'm just searching for texture materials, there's a whole bunch of them where people have uploaded their textures to the Unity store, and they're either for pay or you can download free assets. Now, this is where you might see the argument they're just using free assets. Their game looks like crap. Well, it's because they just pulled down free assets from the store, for instance. So I downloaded this asphalt texture before. So there was a download button. So now I'm just going to click import. And it's basically a zip file that you downloaded with all the textures. And here are all of your textures that you can import into Unity. If I wanted to keep my file size down, I would only import what I need. I'm just going to import all of them for just to show you the process, basically. Hello. All right, so now I've imported everything, and you see down here into my assets folder, I have asphalt materials. All right, so I've got materials, scenes, textures. So I've got a default scene I could check out, for instance. So double click this, and here is a bunch of asphalt textures applied to various spheres. All right, this is a default scene. I didn't need to import the scene. I just did it to kind of demonstrate this. I would just pick, the materials that I want, for instance. Let's go back to my sample scene here. Got my object. Let's make this my frame of reference here. So I've got this boy here. Let's make my light a little bit less intense so that we can actually see it. All right, so I still have our default texture slapped on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to import this guy and just kind of drag it onto my object. And now the question is going to be, what component was I spacing on? Oh, just apply the asphalt material, okay. The default material was updated to be this asphalt material, so you don't see default material here anymore. But now I've got what kind of looks like an asphalt moon kind of thing. So now I can just click play, and my rotating, zipping around ovoid object is now textured. So to apply this texture, all I did was download an asset and drag and drop it, right? Contrast that with what you've had to do in Blender or in WebGL to add a texture that wasn't the default color. And you can see why this is kind of neat. I just use the default asset. Keep in mind that you can still do things like UV mapping to wrap this a little bit nicer. This is all baked into it. I'm just doing the very basic aspects here. Come on, please start responding. Did I kill Unity? Okay, starting to slow down here. You can also apply various shaders, various effects to this texture as well, just by playing with some of these properties. So that's actually a look not only at texturing, but at the asset store too. And with these materials, you can add like a bump map where this texture has like little pits and grooves and all that. You can add a specular map to show what's reflective and what's not. You know, kind of like last time when we looked at the globe and we wrapped the you know, the map of Earth around a sphere. They also added on the bump map. They also added on the specular map and the normal map and all that. Well, the normal map is the bump map in that case. All right, so we have an object, we have material. Let's add terrain. So right now, this thing is just floating in space. I can add a new game object, a 3D object, and terrain, and now I have a floor. And it's way down here. So, you know, let's do this. I'm going to start a new project just so that we can get more into a normal space. So, demo 4900-2. This is actually going to pop open a new instance of Unity, so I can have multiple projects going at any given time. That means I'm going to kill this one so that I don't completely constrain my resources. Questions so far while this loads? I assume we're good. I guess while this is going, again, I'll put out the recommendation if any of you are Twitch experts or a little bit more pro at Twitch than I am. If there are things you want me to add to the chat to make it a little more interesting for you, feel free to let me know. I'm just running it like a normal lecture, but if you want to, you know, add one of those games in there to keep you occupied while I drone on, that's fine. I guess the other thing too, so this is a question for you guys. I know that I can add in the chat text over the video. So like I would see your comments, you know, popping up on the screen. Well, I wouldn't see it, but you would all see it in the VOD or the stream or like that. I don't know if that would be distracting or helpful. So if you guys want that, I'll just keep an eye on the chat and let me know what you think. This is taking forever. Probably shouldn't have created it. I should have just had it open already. So while this is loading, we're going to add a terrain, and I'm going to add another sphere or a cube or something like that to interact with it. But basically, the terrain is going to be your ground plane. You can set physics properties on this just like any other object. But this would be like, you know, what your character's walking on or, you know, your ground, basically. And what we're going to be doing in here is that we're going to get a terrain object here. And you see some of these options. Like you can click this little paint tool and I can make mountains. So I'm going to paint some elevation. You can add trees, you can add flowers. One of the options or the notes I have in here is make your brush size 1. That's just if you want a smaller area to play with. The brush size is basically how much area I'm going to deform. So consider like that the donut that we started looking at in Blender, where it was picking a certain number of vertices to deform. It's the same concept here. So are you loaded yet? Good. All right. So I've got my default scene. I'm going to add terrain. So here's my terrain. Everything is kind of axis oriented here at the corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it in the X and Z direction so that I don't necessarily have it right there. And now let's also add let's add a cube. So my cube is underneath, which is not good. We want it up on top. So probably shouldn't have been dinking around with the locations. So right now, my cube is kind of floating in space. You can kind of see that it's offset a little bit. I could do whatever I want for this. Let's just leave it here to show what gravity looks like. All right, so right now, terrain, cube, and hit play. Nothing happens, right? Nobody is a rigid body. Nobody has a collision box on it. It is just a object in place. So first, let's look at deforming our terrain here. So here is the little panel I was talking about. I'm gonna click my brush. I can have various paintbrush styles. Make my brush show a little bit bigger. And you can actually see a preview of what's gonna happen here. So let's make huge mountain range. And let's just deform things here. So if I make my brush size a lot bigger, I can have a bigger mountain range, but makes it rise a little bit less. So again, I'm just deforming my geometry here. Now if I click play again, I'm still looking at the camera view, so I don't necessarily have anything to see here other than the perspective of the camera. All right, so I've got my nice terrain here. Let's go back to the slides. We can also add grass, can add trees. Again, we're gonna have to go back to the asset store, but there is this standard asset pack. So I'm gonna go ahead and import this. So let's search for standard. Pick free, so I don't pay for anything. And then there's the standard assets. This is a large list. If you are following along or you're going to do this later on, make sure that you don't import everything, because what I've noticed is that some of these assets are actually not up to date. So it actually says standard assets for Unity 2017. So if you import everything, you will get compiler errors, which are going to be a pain in the butt to fix. So we're just going to import a tree, and we're going to import a character. And apparently today we're going to go the whole time. Again, I need to get better at this we'll be done early thing, because I doubt we're going to be done early. All right, so I don't want any of these sample scenes. I just want... Actually, I don't even know that I need a tree. Let's add the third person character, because I'm going to need that. I'm going to need cross-platform inputs. You'll see later why. Did I need a tree? I don't think I need a tree. Sorry, I'm gonna go back and forth here. All right, I'm gonna import the character and let that go for now. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna define some trees, and we're gonna add some trees into our place. So here, that's gonna take a hot minute. Let's go back to our scene. Nope, I don't have that option. We'll wait for this to finish importing. But one of the things that you will find if you want to draw trees or any other kind of flora or fauna or anything like that is that I'm going to add a tree, and then you actually have to define what that tree looks like. So there is, for instance, this edit trees property that we have. So we're going to define what a base tree looks like. How many branches, how much foliage is there, what do the leaves look like? What is the flexibility of randomness from how many branches? So there's lots of properties to play with here. We'll just define kind of a simple tree. But what I want to do now here is in my terrain, inspector tab is not, okay, not sure what's going on there. So I click the tree button, and now I want to paint some trees, but no trees have been defined. So it's going to try to put trees down and has no idea what to put in there. So I'm going to click Edit Trees, add a tree. Please assign a tree. Okay, well, I didn't import the tree, so that's not going to work. I forgot to import a tree. I don't remember how to do this in here, because I didn't import it from the store. 1 moment, please. Forgot the tree. All right, I don't want a scene. Where are the trees? Cameras, characters. So as I'm kind of zipping through this, you might be noticing lots of different options like play around with water, reflection, and refractiveness, lens flares, all kinds of cool things. That's why assets are very, very cool. All right, so here we got a tree, speed tree, conifer. Oh, so yeah, here's all my trees. All right, so let's add, it's getting kind of nice. Let's add a palm tree. I think this is the right asset. If it's not the right asset, we'll just move on. So basically everything that defines what a tree can be, I'm importing. I don't have to take the time to define it, which is kind of nice to me at least. All right, so edit trees, add tree. I'm gonna click this little circle here, and now I'm going to add in a, hopefully, palm tree. Add. So now I have added the palm tree in here. So add tree. Did I not click it? Guess I didn't click it. Palm tree. Add. Thank you. All right. So here in, if I had multiple trees I wanted to add, I would just pick which one I wanted. But I can just click. Hey, I've got some palm trees. How cool. The brush size is quite large, so it set trees in this area. I could also mass place trees. Let's say I wanted 10,000 trees. Randomly sporadically thrown in the scene here. I can click play. And now I've got, what was that, like Far Cry 3 or Far Cry 2, which is one where they were in the jungle. But I've got palm trees. Bark has texture. The trees would interact with wind if I had wind. So again, a lot of this effort that you would have to be doing yourself is taken care of by Unity. And in the editor, you can play with, how much the trees are bent and things like that. Since we're kind of gonna be cutting close on time here, physics are baked into Unity as well. So we will get into these later on. The collision detection I mentioned, the callbacks that we have on collision enter, on collision exit. So basically, what happens when you first collide, what happens while you're colliding, and what happens when you're done colliding. All right, so these are going to be useful for us. We'll be getting into this later on. All right, so then the last two things we're going to do, which I think are really, really cool. First, let's add a player character. So let's get rid of this cube. So you can go away. I'm just going to delete it by cube. We'll leave the trees in for funsies. Terrain collider. We'll leave the collider in as well. So let's add a person. We're going to add an animated character just from the standard asset library. So if you pull down that standard assets, I probably should see if there's a 2019 version, but third-person character asset and cross-platform input. All right, so I already imported those earlier, but what you see here under this standard assets is characters, third person, and then I want to go into their prefabs, and here's a third person. I'm going to drag him onto the scene. So now I can double click. Hey, I've got a guy. You can see that he's got a little capsule around him. So this is a capsule collider. It's not doing perfect collision detection with arms and legs. It's just this capsule is being collided with. All right, so I drag and drop the person on the scene. We're in our nice T-pose. This is kind of the standard model shape. One more thing we can do here. Let's drag our camera onto this person. Onto the person. Thank you. So now the camera is a child of our character. Now I'm talking like a Valley Girl and ending all my questions with my sentences with questions. So here, I clicked play. You can see the camera's looking at my dude. He's just kind of got a steady state animation. Nice thing about this character prefab, it has controls attached to it. So I can use my arrow keys. I've got a guy running around my little jungle environment. Now check this out. He's running along the terrain. He's running along a hillside, right? I have done nothing other than drag and drop and click a couple settings. And now I have a fully 3D animated character running through a jungle. To me, this is one of the coolest things in the world that I have. A guy running around. Obviously everything's set to the default, right? If you want this to feel better, to look better, obviously here you can see clipping based on what the camera's looking at. You would make this a little bit nicer. But I can run around the world. I can hit space. I can mess around with this guy's jump settings. My camera is currently locked because I haven't done anything to it. But now I can just kind of fall off the world, right? So very, very straightforward. And what I can do too, let's make this our frame of reference. Where's our camera at? I can make my camera a lot closer. So you can see the preview here. Let's go up a little bit. And let's rotate it around X. No, Z, sorry. No, what? What am I doing here? X, it was X. I'm an idiot. We all knew that already. So I moved the camera. Now I've got a little top view. My guy's a lot closer. I've got an over-the-shoulder 3D game, or third-person game. And it's like, he's moving off to the left just because I've deformed the terrain. But think of how much of a pain in the butt this would be in render and straight up WebGL. To me, this would take weeks of development to even get to this point. But you can see like the collider's not all that great here, right? I've got one of these things. So this is what you get with the default, just dropped it in there. All right, so last thing, let's move our character. I want to move him. So let's move him way over here. What I want to do is one more thing before we end. I want to get him to a flat place, basically. So I haven't mucked about with the environment here. And with this terrain, can I select these guys? No, the trees are all just kind of baked in here. Shift and click to erase trees. Okay, good. Let's do this. So I'm holding Shift and click and I'm erasing trees. Again, if you are a game designer, not necessarily a game programmer, this kind of a tool is absolutely wonderful. All right, so let's move our guy here. Last but not least, in my assets here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop over to Windows Explorer here. Documents, Blender demos. Here's my house, house.blend. I'm going to import my Blender house. Look at that. So the lab that you guys did last week before, whenever it was, it's in Blender. Or sorry, it's in Unity. How cool is that? So we can't see anything. Let's add another light. So let's create a light source. So let's make let's bump the intensity up a little bit. Why are we not lighting? Oh, it's too low. Why are you not lighting this up? Oh, so that's the other thing too I should mention. I imported my Blender model. It came in as a prefab with every single Blender property you applied to it. So there is a camera, there is a light built into it from what you had in Blender. What you need to do is you want the camera. Actually, I'll just demo this because right now what's going to happen, I'm going to click play. The main camera is actually going to be on the house. So it's going to be your camera model from Blender is going to take over. So my character is moving around off in space somewhere, but it's locked to my house because it's using this camera. So what you have to do is you have to unpack the prefab. I'm just going to unpack everything. I'm going to delete this camera. I'm going to delete this light since it's not going to be helpful. And now I'm going to use this point light as my light source here. What I should be seeing is this should be getting lit up, and I'm not sure why it isn't. Range, let's make the range bigger, intensity bigger. What am I missing here? I ran into this last night too. I'm not sure why this isn't lighting up the house. But what I can do, let's move it inside the house. And now I've got my donut. It's right there. Come on. That's good enough, I guess. I could play around with this as much as I want and still not be happy. But so I've got my house, I've got my donut. I've added a light inside the house. I could probably make it a child or something like that. But yes, giant donut. Absolutely wonderful. The thing that you're going to see though, so where's my man's right here. All right, so let's hit play. Again, I got rid of the camera from the house, so we should have the main camera take over. If I look over here, I'm just going to walk through this thing, I believe. Yeah. So there we go. Let's pray to the giant donut. There is no collision detection on my Blender model. If there's time, I'll load up my example because I actually had it working a lot nicer. We need to add some colliders to the actual house. All right. So at minimum, I think what I did was just on the house itself. Let's make it a rigid body. Okay. Let's add a collider. Let's just do a box collider. I think that's all I need. I can't remember if I had to do it to each object separately or not. Yes. Pray to your donut gods. Uh-oh. It fell through the world. Forgot, let's move this up a touch. Bloop. So if you ever see objects in games kind of like this where it looks like they've settled into place, it's because the person just moved its Y location up a little bit so that it doesn't just fall through space. Now, hey, why didn't you work? Oh, you know what I didn't do? I need to add a collider on the foundation. Box collider. Not sure why we're still... All right, so now there's no mass to it, so I'm just kind of pushing the house. But what I can do, let's make my person a little bit bigger. So where's my dude? Ethan. Let's make him slightly larger. And I can play around with his script parameters. So this is what I mentioned where the scripts that you write for objects can become attributes in here. I can make him jump a lot more. I can move his speed. I can change various aspects of him. So now I've made him bigger. I just scaled his model and I've made his jump power higher. So now I can jump more, right? And ideally, ugh, camera, come on. Jump into the house. Come on. Jump. Come on, Ethan. Jump. I didn't make it high enough. All right, one more time. Home improvement references. Get in there. All right, pray to the donut god. I didn't add a collider to the donut. I just added it to the prefab itself. But interesting things. Blender model imported. I can work with every single layer in that Blender model as a Unity object. I can add all of these components to them on top of what we did in Blender. And yeah, you can also see that this point light that I added inside here is kind of giving me, what was that Wii game? What was like super bloody, where it was all in black and white. Basically, I've got a super intense light that is actually interacting with my character. And again, I've done nothing. I just used an asset to do this. So what we can do to end here, let's go around the back of the house. Interestingly, my texture didn't come through. So this is one thing which you might notice as well. If you remember when you were applying textures, there was that pack image option. My textures did not get applied to the house, so I didn't actually do that pack them and save them. Because if you pack them into the blend file, you can import that in here. I didn't do that step, obviously. But let's push this massless house. And I think I'm going the right way. Goodbye. So yeah, very basic intro to Blender. Feel free to play around with all of these options. Now, I've got some out-of-class work for you to do. I'm not going to make it a Moodle assignment, so this is more to get you used to using Unity. But I would recommend, honestly, trying this last demo that I did. Add the terrain, deform it, add some trees, add some flowers if you want. Pull down some of those free assets, and make a scene that you can play around with, honestly. It's much easier than you think it is. And I've screwed up a couple of things here as we went. It's part of the process. But I would definitely recommend giving it a shot. Oh, last thing. Let me show you this. So I want to build this. So build settings. Here are all of my targets that I can make for PC, Mac, and Linux, Windows, Android, WebGL, tvOS. So I assume that's the Mac OS Apple box thing. You could build PS4, Xbone, iOS. There's probably a tool chain for the Switch as well, which I assume you'd have to pay an exorbitant fee for the dev kit. Let's say I want to build this for WebGL. Dev builds. Do I not have it? You also have to download the toolkit for this, so not sure how long this is going to take. I didn't try this. I just kind of thought you might want to see this. So yeah, it's basically loading in everything that it needs to build a WebGL application. All right, out of coffee, class is just about done. All right, so build. Let's put it, sure, just right in here. And build. Please. Do I have to make a builder? I'm probably screwing something up here. Select folder. Or is it already done? Oh, invalid build path. Okay, yeah, didn't like that build path. Any questions while this is building? Guess while you all think of your earth-shattering questions. Oh, it's still going. F. Why are we putting F's in chat? Everything's going fine. It's just taking a minute to build. Patience. Patience, patience. Oh, probably because I dropped a million trees down. That's why. Oh, is it? Should still be going. I mean, everything looks okay from my end. Is the stream working? Can you guys hear me at least? Let's get some recursion going here. Yeah, I probably shouldn't build a Unity project while streaming. Maybe I should bring in my massive computer from work that's spec to handle VR. That might not be a bad idea, actually. All right, cancel. Let's just cancel this. Next wall, you all think of your... All right. Are we good now? All right, so I'm going to close Unity. Hopefully this is still going okay. Are we good so far? Yeah, so silly me building Unity project, probably a bad idea, but that would build, it would make a web page with all the WebGL hooks. Could be delayed, yeah, it's fine. So the last thing I want to show you before we call it quits for the day, I did the rollerball demo. This was about a week ago, or not a week ago, a couple semesters ago. But this is the rollerball demo that has been built for WebGL. Maybe try reconnecting if you can't hear me. I'll type this out. But here we have a WebGL player where I just did that rollerball demo through the Unity tutorials. I tweaked it a little bit to make the ball go ridiculously fast once you start collecting things. But here, I've got my terrain. My ball is controlled by my arrow keys. And you just pick up these rotating cubes. And as you pick them up, your ball goes faster and it gets ridiculously fast. Just to dink around with the system. But those cubes are all prefabs. So I made one cube. I set it to rotate, every frame basically. And then you just copy it several times and place the objects where you want them to go. So I guess to summarize, Unity's super cool. We're going to be playing around with this for the rest of the semester. And also, everybody's presentation should be scheduled now. So again, they're going to be coming up very soon here. Actually, next week, Thursday is our first one. So try to start maybe practicing with the technology that you're going to use to present, and make sure that everything's good, because during class time, we'll just have you present your project or whatever you're presenting, basically. So again, please let me know as soon as possible how you want to present to the class, and we will schedule it so that everybody has the technology or whatever program you need to run it. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to let me know. Now that I think of it, I don't think I put these slides up on Moodle, did I? I will do that right now. But Other than that, the stream will go up a little bit later as soon as it's done encoding. And thank you all for dropping by again. Good to see everybody's at least still interested. So have a wonderful weekend, and I will talk to you all on Tuesday. Bye bye.